Hey buddy, so int. All of us has used int and we are still using int when we are writing our code. But do you know, other than normal int 16, int 32, int 64, long, there is something called an int. Microsoft has introduced an int and stands here natural. So they have introduced natural int in C# 9.0. So if you are using C# language greater or equal to 9.0, you are free to use this an int. Now, where actually you have to use an int? What benefit we can receive that all those regular or old integers were not covering. So let's go ahead and take just 2 lines of code and try to understand this an int concept. So let's go ahead. Okay, so here we are in the Visual Studio and we are going to use just these 2 lines to understand this whole concept. The first line, I'm trying to find the size of native integer or natural integer. So it's all up to you if you want to call it natural or native integer, right? And the syntax is very simple, that you just have to use the property. You have to say an int and I need a size. So you have to say dot size, right? So this logic, why I have written, because the default size, it would return in bytes and I wanted to convert into a bit, right? So what I have used, I have multiplied with 8 and then I've written just bit. So it can give me a result from bytes to a bit. The other line is just a integer, the size of the integer, but the syntax here, it is a little different. Instead of property, you have to use a size of method and then you have to pass the integer. The integer, for which you wanted to find the size. And same, just convert from bytes to bit. I have used this formula. Okay, now, why this an int is different from the other integer? Why this n is different, right? So, an int is not CPU architecture specific. So that means this an int will work on 32-bit operating system and 64-bit operating system on any platform. But int, it's 32 bits, so it may not work on 64-bit operating system. You may not see this issue every time, but when you're working with the low library application, you're writing a specific code that deal with 64-bit operating system functions, right? At that time, there is very high possibility that int 32 will fail on 64-bit system and vice versa. If you have written a code for 64-bit, if you have written a code for int 64 and you try to run on 32-bit operating system, it will fail. If you are dealing the core functions of a operating system, right? If you're dealing with the core functions of that operating system, okay, but an int will never fail. So an int, it's a native, it's natural, so it convert itself at the runtime. If it is deployed on 32-bit, it will be 32-bit int. If it is deployed on 64-bit, it will be converted into 64-bit int, right? Now let's see. This is 64-bit, right? I'm debugging my application is x64 and my operating system that I'm using, that is 64-bit operating system. So the size of an int should be 64-bit and size of int is always going to be 32-bit. So I'm going to run it. Let's run it and here you see native integer size is 64-bit, but the size of integer is 32-bit. That is going to be fixed, right? Since my application is compiled in 64-bit, that is why you see an int is 64-bit, right? Now what I will do, I will convert this into x86. I'm going to make a build in 32-bit. So x86 is 32-bit operating system, right? So let's debug it and now let's see the size of an int. So I should see 32-bit. Here you go. You see the size of native integer is 32-bit now. Before it was 64-bit, but here you see integer size is not getting changed. It is always 32-bit, but an int always depend on where you compile, where you want to deploy, so it will convert itself. So that means you will not face the error, right? And same if you go to any CPU, so any CPU dependent on the structure, the architecture of my machine, right? So if you deploy now, since my machine is 64-bit, so the size of integer should be 64-bit. So if I run it, let's go and now let's see, let me press enter. Here you see 64-bit, right? So an int is not CPU architecture specific. So now the question is where to use an int. The first question that we will just answer while writing this code, while understanding this code, that when you are dealing with low class library, when you are writing your code that deal with core functions of the operating system, whether 64-bit or 32-bit. Second, where the performance matter. If you need high performance for the math calculation, let's say you are writing an application for the finance, for the fintech, right, where you need huge math calculation. At that time, you can use an int. Okay, so that's all for today's video. I will see you in the next video.